It's the Misfits.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We are doing a special episode today. This is half Is It Pagan, half Ministry Misfits, and of course we can't do any of that without Joe Day coming back on in the midst of COVID. He is fighting through to bring you the content we all know you really want, which is to answer the question of if Thanksgiving is pagan or not. Like we said, today is also we are doing Is It Pagan? We're talking the word in the holiday Thanksgiving. It is also Giving Tuesday if you're listening to this on the day of release. If you are a misfit, though, it is actually Giving Month. Reminder, you have till the end of November. If you join Patreon, you will not only be supporting Misfits, but the money that we get in from Patreon this month is all going to our friends over at Tikva to help with the work that they're doing with our inner city kids here in Canton. So go to Patreon, ministrymisfits.com, patreon.com /ministrymisfits, and you'll be able to join there at any of the levels, get access to all the fun features, including the episode we just did with Joel Bowman talking mental health and gun violence and all that good stuff. Well, I guess that's not good stuff. All the other extra goodies that are on there, including the Bible studies as well. So go check that out. Like we said, though, today is not a normal day because we're kind of knocking 2 episodes from 2 shows out at once. And doing so in, I guess, since you had me run this show, Misfit style fashion. So we're going to start by answering the question, though, of...
Is it pagan?
Yes. Is it pagan? Is Thanksgiving pagan? If you have no idea what I'm talking about, Joe and I started this thing as a joke, and then we decided to keep it going, where every holiday we get together and answer the question as far as if it's pagan, including Mother's Day and Father's Day and all of that.
The best part is people within our field have done so much more extensive research that it's hilarious to me that that this has ended up becoming a thing, that we're just doing all of the holidays.
Right. Well, and not only that, but like they've done all this extensive research and do all this academic work and then still come up with the fact, well, it has some pagan roots, and we're sitting here like, no, it's not that hard to use Google. Yeah. So today, though, we're going to answer the question of if Thanksgiving is a pagan holiday. And so, Joe, I have a question for you for how were you taught as far as what the Thanksgiving story is? What was your growing up as far as what Thanksgiving was?
Oh, so you're teeing me up to already aggravate some people right out the gate. So
that's why I bring you on. So
yeah, absolutely. I make you look mild. So here's the deal. My upbringing is very East Coast, and so it was all straightforward Pilgrims, Native Americans, the whole 9 yards, like every cliche and grossity about that very like kids story sort of upbringing about it that you could get as far as this goes. And honestly, to be honest, I can remember for the very short time when I was a kid, when I was a part of a Sunday school program, the church wasn't deviating too far from it. It just was more of like the God flavored portion of it, painting everybody to like be great people and all of that sort of stuff, and like they came together under God and all of that sort of stuff. But it was still that same very and for if you haven't caught it from my tone of voice, for anybody who doesn't already know this, that's all a fairy tale. That I mean, that there are some people that by name and maybe general reference that there's some association to be made, but otherwise it's a fairy tale. And certainly is not something to be associated with the Christian church and all of that. So,
right. So, I grew up going to Christian school. And so it was very much of what you were just saying, as far as it's all very much a big party. Everybody's celebrating together because the Native Americans helped us survive. And so we have to go and and we threw a big feast, and it was all about thanking God for keeping us alive during the winter and for us making new friends. And it started this great thing that we now call America. So obviously, it's not pagan in origin, but the myth we need to dispel at the moment is that it's Christian in origin. Because who are the pilgrims, Joe? Who at least that you were taught, who were the pilgrims?
Oh, I feel like at some point I was taught that they were the settlers of the land, I guess, like people coming from another country and came to settle the land and all of
Why?
that.
Oh, just to settle.
Yeah. Like I said, cupcakes and unicorns going on here. So that the way it was taught, a lot of those details were get as little specificity as you can, maybe a little bit of hand waving to get to the point of, like you said, praise God. We got to praise God for the meal. Think about the meal. We're all together. Like, it's all kind of like moving very quickly past, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see. Yeah. So that at one point it was them there. But I feel like the general consensus were different flavors of they were explorers that were saved by the Native Americans, and thus everybody came together for a big happy meal because
I'm picturing them all sitting down with Happy Meal boxes now. Thank you for that. No, yeah. So that's one theory that's out there that's wrong, but it's out there. The other theory that's out there and is also completely wrong is that the pilgrims were all religious refugees that were escaping persecution, and they were all Puritans, which is the other version that you hear all the time. It was about the Puritan church, and they were trying to leave the Anglican persecution, so they went to Holland first and then got persecuted there, and so they came over here and settled down, and God blessed them, and now we have the big city on the hill and everything else.
Right.
Here's what the actual facts of the matter are. 37 of the 102 people that were on the boat were Puritan separatists. They were separating themselves out from England as Puritans. They wanted a religious settlement to live. 37 out of 102, Joe, I am not math, but is that a majority?
No, not even a little bit.
Not even close. Most of the pilgrims were not Puritans or separatists. No. Most of the remaining were the security force that was hired by the Puritans and the separatists, or were the servants and slaves of those Puritans.
Exactly.
They wanted to come over and establish, surprise, surprise, a Christian nation.
Yep.
These are Christian nationalists that are coming over, and they actually settled in the wrong spot because they wanted to go as far away from England's grasp as possible so that they could set up a puritanical government while still being able to enjoy the benefits of being English citizens.
Right.
The problem was they landed in the wrong spot and were very, very close to the Virginia colonies.
Yeah.
And so, as a result, the Mayflower Compact that was signed, establishing them as a colony, was one where the Puritans would be able to rule, but without actually establishing the Christian government that they desired. And because of this, they did not get the support that they were supposed to be getting from the crown, which is why when the winter hit, they had to find help elsewhere. And so you have the indigenous people that come and do provide help for them and everything else. But the exchange was not done in an evangelistic manner like we like to be told. It was done in a, we are glad to receive the help, and then as soon as the help is received, we now take your lands.
Yep. Yeah. It was very much, it was a lot closer to a bait and switch than it was some
It was a
kind of
100%
happy
bait and
days.
switch.
Yeah.
And this is where we see the reality that the Thanksgiving Day was one snapshot of peace prior to lifetimes and generations of oppression.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so one of the things that I find fascinating about discussing this specific holiday is the grumblings of pagan association live so far underneath the surface because this is, I mean, short of a conversation about July 4th, the day for nationalists.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And for because that and so much misinformation has been disseminated openly by
Right.
the public school system. Like, I'm not some, like, I'm sitting here making jokes about it, but I'm a product of the public school system. So, like, it's not like this is something that only happens with folks that are super, you know, secluded from normal education or normal society or something like that. No, we're talking about the cupcake stuff that gets taught very freely still to kids with very little in the way of calling anybody out on fact checking. And so it's fascinating to me that there's a substantive portion of the people that won't even think to ask, is it pagan? Because that doesn't really even get talked about, even though there is a contingent of people who really do legitimately think that this day is pagan.
Right.
And then you have all of this conversation of like basic historical facts. Now, let me ask you a question real quick, Andrew. Do you have your master's?
Not yet.
Okay. I don't either. And so I say all of that to say that, yes, we are both academically trained. Yes, we are both learned people and all of that. Absolutely. Yo, the things that we're talking about here, you can, if you take 10 minutes and leave your biasness at the door and find actual historical information, you will know the actual story of how all of this came about without any of the biasness or any of the issues that come from the way that most of us were brought up to think that all of this happened.
And this is where it gets in. And one place that's actually very interesting to look is if you actually search for the, and I'm going to say it wrong, the Wampangpak people, they have a website online that highlights their actual tribal history. And they have an entire section on this day. It's not hard to find if you actually go looking for it. When we're talking about these sort of things, this is exactly, Brandon and I covered this when we did the Cold War theology episode. The American roots for what becomes what we describe as Cold War theology starts right here.
Yeah.
It starts with the Puritans coming over and declaring that they are going to start a nation that will be a city on a hill. That's where our churches are getting this information from. That's where our Christian schools are getting this information from as far as what the Thanksgiving holiday is actually about in America. The public school is going the opposite direction. We've got the doctrine of discovery going on here. This is colonization as far as the colonization trumps any of the oppression that was presented. those things, while not necessarily pagan, are definitely not Christian. Those things deny the Imago Dei. They deny love of neighbor. They deny all of these different things. But yet we still try to promote Thanksgiving as one of the actual holy days within the American calendar.
Right.
What's interesting about it, though, is that Thanksgiving is not just an American holiday anymore.
No.
There are multiple Thanksgiving days throughout the world, and none of them have to do anything with the Pilgrims or the Native Americans or any kind of founding of the country. Instead, it's a celebration of community, and it's a celebration of coming together to be thankful for what we have and be thankful for those that we have with us.
Right. And
that is the other side of what we want to actually talk about today, is what Thanksgiving actually is in terms of what the Bible actually talks about it.
Right.
So, Joe, I'm going to see if you did any homework or not, or if you know these off the top of your head. The word Thanksgiving, do you know what it would be in Hebrew?
No. I'm not even gonna try.
You're not even gonna try. Come on, man. It's Tada. That's a fun way of saying it. It's probably more Toda, but it literally means to have Thanksgiving. It's used 32 times in the Old Testament, most of them coming out of the Psalms. We give thanks to the Lord, all these sort of things. In the Greek, this is the one that you should actually probably know, assuming that our good friend Ant taught you well. Any guesses as to what the Greek word for Thanksgiving is?
I know it. It's not I don't know it off the top of my head.
Eucharistia.
Yeah. It's
Eucharistia.
Yeah.
It's the same word we use to get the Eucharist from.
For the Eucharist. Yeah.
Because it's about thankfulness and a giving of thanks. And it's used 15 times. But it's about the body giving thanks. It's about the heart giving thanks for what was done. That's not how we ever talk about Thanksgiving when we ever hear people around this time of year preaching on being thankful. Why do you think we don't ever actually focus on the community aspect of even the word Thanksgiving in our churches as much as we should?
Because you're talking from one person who's trained versus another person who's trained. So we already unfortunately, because you can find all of this stuff again on Google. So this is not for the elect or the special or anything else like that. However, we have gone through training that has brought us face to face with these definitions, with these words, with the all of that sort of stuff. So that's a part of it that when you're talking about the Christian perspective, most people will have no idea that there is an association between Thanksgiving and the Eucharist and what these words mean. And so if you don't have anything to counterbalance all of these other things that most people have been taught incorrectly, then suddenly those incorrect thoughts get to run rampant in the in the mentality of how you handle holidays, concepts, thought processes, especially things in the West that have to do with nationalism. And so you couple that with the fact that if you do know anything about Thanksgiving, a lot of the time out of the pulpit, you're getting something that's very me-centric when talking about giving thanks or gratitude or different things like that, that it's still very self-centered. in nature, because then you go on to this idea of loving with rejoicing with those who rejoice, weeping with those who weep, the whole community aspect of processing and all of that sort of stuff that doesn't necessarily find a constant home within the Western church.
And that's the answer as to why it's not there. But the bigger question I'm asking is, why do we not actually teach it this way? And
because you have to, because
ahead.
when you drill into a problem, eventually you have to realize that this problem is way bigger than even for the people who study the problem realize that it is most of the time. That you keep peeling back layer and, oh, hey, here's another group of people who thought this way. Oh, hey, here's another group of people who thought this way. And then eventually you get to the point of, this has been taught systemically so many times that this is just fact. This isn't a countercultural concept. This isn't something that brustles up against anything else. Anything that doesn't think like you is wrong, because you have the truth. So this is, you are kicking over beehives that are systemic in nature and very, very long in the tooth.
Well, and part of what you just highlighted there, though, is part of the irony with it, especially with this topic specifically, is that what you were describing there was this idea of the systemic nature of it, and if you don't agree with me, you're wrong, and you just need to bow down to the truth and everything else.
Right.
But part of the central focus of the word of Thanksgiving is an aspect of community.
Right.
And it's a community that is surrounded, is focused in on a shared experience.
Yeah.
Of which we are supposed to be giving thanks.
Yeah.
But instead, we want to highlight our differences rather than share the experience of the fact that we all have come to recognize that Christ has died for us.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm going to say this a little glibly, maybe even a little tongue-in-cheek. Unfortunately, not all of us were ordained by a guy whose central focus is community and building, making disciples who can make disciples. And I say that tongue in cheek because the guy who ordained me is probably going to be listening to this, and he knows, and I know, and we all know the fact that I did know that word, but I blame it on brain fog.
You're just trying to backtrack now to make sure he doesn't take away the certificate he just gave you last week.
Listen. But no, jokes aside and ribs aside, this is something that hits on part of the reason why I get blamed for being a Catholic all the time. And the reality is that if the fundamental misunderstanding starts at the Eucharist is nothing more than a little cup with juice and a wafer, and if you're real saucy, you might have a spot that allows for wine. That if that's the sum total of your experience, and maybe you have some peppering of, I have to deal with my sin and shame in order to take this cup, that this cup is a reminder of everything that I've done wrong and I have to get right in order to take it, then that ship of community, of coming together to engage together in this idea of the death, burial, resurrection, dude, that ship is gone. That ship was never, you were never in path of that ship. You were taking some Welch's and a gross little cracker. That's what you were doing. And I don't mean to be a jerk. I really don't. But part of the path that I have been on, for the last year has brought me very closely associated with this idea of what does it mean to have community? What does it mean to take the communion? What does it mean to live in light of the resurrection? And in addressing these very central questions that are the very foundation and very bedrock as to why a day like Thanksgiving can be so significant. Not because thou shalt celebrate on the last Thursday of every November. No. But okay, so we have this day that's central around this idea of giving thanks. What happens if we use that as a day to acknowledge and teach the community aspect of this giving of thanks and what that means and all of that sort of stuff? Yes, obviously the counter argument is, should we have that be the only day? No, just like Easter shouldn't be the only day that we remember the resurrection. But if there's a day dedicated to it, then why don't we take advantage of it? Like, come on.
And the word that you are kind of dancing around but not actually using is that Thanksgiving, Eucharist, both in the term of Eucharist as the Lord's Supper and Eucharist as the act of thanksgiving, both of these things ultimately come down to the fact that it is a form of worship.
Yes.
And this is one of the few areas of worship that has to be done corporately. It's about the community. The whole point of the meal in 1 Corinthians 15 was not just for the bread and the wine. It was about a gathering of the community to share a meal together and to give thanks for what God had blessed the community with, and to remember and to proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.
So real quick, we always have one of these on every single episode because somebody is stepping into somebody else's environment and all of this sort of stuff. So this one's mine. Real quick. So BWC, for those of you guys that are coming by way of the Buddy Walk community, please understand that Andrew and I have been working together for years, plural with an S. And if there was in any way, shape, or form an opportunity, or I thought that Andrew would take an opportunity to say that you have to be in a specific church building, in a specific posture, in a specific context, in order for communion to matter, then we would not be working together. So please do not hear what this man is not saying, because he is not saying any of those baggagey things that unfortunately a lot of you guys have heard and all of that sort of stuff. I just want to clarify the fact that whether you are by yourself in situations that call for that, or you are among a body of believers from a distance and you still engage in this act of worship, the geographic location is not what he is commenting on.
We're talking about the body.
Yes.
It's about the body. And that's part of why we need to break down one other word that gets thrown in all the time with Thanksgiving, to actually narrow down what it means when we are told to pray prayers of thanksgiving, or to give, I can't, now I just lost the other phrase that comes with it, but the other phrases in Philippians that we have with the idea of giving thanks to God. That's the phrase, giving thanks to God. You know, those are the things that we need to look at. And the fact of the matter is that worship is the goal. Right. Regardless of all of this, worship is the goal. So if you don't hear anything else we say, one is that Thanksgiving is not pagan. Thanksgiving is not Christian, but the concept of Thanksgiving is a Christian form of worship to God.
Yes.
And it's done as part of the body. Yeah. Now, for those that want to continue, The other word that gets thrown around a lot with Thanksgiving is the idea of praise.
Yeah.
So, Joe, if you were to define praise, because you are, at least at the moment, the only musician in the room, what is praise when we're talking about praise? How would you define it?
Recognition, recognition of the thing that you are giving the praise to. That can look like adulation, that can look like music, that can look like spoken word. There's a lot of versions and manifestations of the idea of praise, but at its root, it is just it's that acknowledgement of the thing that you are giving praise to.
And the reason why there's so many different pieces is because we have a lot of different words in the text that all get translated to mean the same thing. Praise has a lot of different Hebrew words. Some of them are talking about holiness. Some of them are just talking about attitudes of worship. Some of them are talking about public singing. Some of them talking about private singing. Some of them talking about public prayer. Some are talking about private prayer. Some are talking about public acts of speech. Some are private thoughts. Same thing within the Greek. You've got the idea of honoring, blessing, worship, singing, praying, all of these different things. And in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, Thanksgiving has its own word as opposed to praise.
Yeah,
So
they're not the same thing.
So the question then is, why are they not the same thing? If both of them are about the act of worship and acknowledgement of the person that is being worshipped, what is the difference?
Because one is more definitive than the other. Is a spot to start. It is not the sum total of the answer, but when you are enacting in praise, part of why it's so general to try and give a definition to it is because all of these different things are still giving acknowledgement of the thing that you are giving praise to. But just because you are giving praise and acknowledging doesn't mean that you're giving thanks. Those they should be coming out of the same place. They should be part of the same thing. They should be very, very similar and resemble each other greatly, but they're not exactly the same because they're not doing exactly the same thing.
And I would take it one step further. Of they're not just not doing the same thing, they are not focused on the same aspects.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely part of it.
Because the biggest difference, and Brandon and I kind of talked about this back when we did the episode on the types of prayer. Praise is focused in on the person, or in this case, God.
Yeah.
The one that you are praising. The giving of thanks is a focus on the action of, or the gift of that person.
Yeah.
It's a response to something, not a reaction to it.
Right.
And that's where it becomes very difficult when we start talking about things like naming the holiday about Thanksgiving. What does this actually look like in terms of when we talk about praying prayers of thanksgiving versus praying prayers of praise? What does that actually look like? Because it's obviously not sitting around the table and sharing a meal when we're talking about prayer. Even though we just said that the Eucharist is actually a meal that we share together. So what is the actual root of how Thanksgiving looks? I guess is the way to say it, if I even said it correctly there. What do we think is the key part of Thanksgiving before we can even get to the forms? What is the actual the key piece to make something an act of Thanksgiving?
So when so many of these conversations about is something pagan, have a way of making it back to the conversation of the intentionality and motive behind what you're doing. I'm fascinated that I'm having this conversation about Thanksgiving. I understand we're not talking about the day at this point, but I still think it's
Well,
fun.
it's all related. It's all
it's all
related,
related.
and that's why we're doing this.
Right. The when you are in a space of giving thanks, this is something that is lived in, and something that is deeper than just action response. And so that intentionality of how you choose to live your life, the posture in which you live your life, not the individual actions, but at a heart level, at a spiritual level, dictates the pace of the dance here.
Mm.
That this we need to, in order to really fully wrap our minds around these concepts and why these things are different but still so similar, why these things matter, and why it seems like we're sitting here splitting hairs and all of that sort of stuff, is we need to get out of the tangible as the first and most important aspect of this temporal aspect of this. Sure, it bleeds into that, but that bleeding into starts so much deeper. And that's why it's important to conceive of, before you even start to have these conversations, think about things like relationship, and where that every single solitary day component of things sits, because otherwise then you are left with a calendar day that you pick this thing up, you try to figure it out. Most people can't quite figure it out, and so they just, oh, it's about football, and put the thing down and move on with their life. You know what I mean? But this is a spirit posture, even before it's a heart posture, even before it's a physical posture. So this is something that you are taking with you and walking with, and this is constant, and this is again lived in and part of the root fundamentals of the Christian identity. Whereas what you do for praise is closer to the level of action response.
Yes. And that is what I was hoping to get to, as far as the root difference, is that Thanksgiving requires an intentional shift of worldview, in the same way that we talked about it when we talked about it in the episode in the blog we did about contentment.
Yeah.
Because the act of giving thanks for what we have requires us to forget about the things that we do not.
Right.
The act of praise is one where it is the response of us in need of something.
Yep.
Praise happens when we are in need of connection with the Father again. Praise happens when we need to just praise the Father because of the fact that He has shown Himself to us again. Praise happens when we feel like we do not have enough, but we know that He is enough.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving happens when we are gathered together and are able to see what the Lord actually has provided us with. That's the part of the community aspect of the body. Right. This is why Thanksgiving is one that is supposed to be done in prayer, listed in 1 Timothy 2 as far as one of the public prayers.
Right. Right.
These are prayers of
And
thanksgiving for the community. These are things where when we gather together for the meal of the Eucharist, we are gathered together as a community with a shared thankfulness that Christ has come and died for us.
right. And that's why I lay out the difference between the praise portion of it and the Thanksgiving portion of it in relation to the individuality aspect. Because if you get caught up in the aspects of Thanksgiving that question whether or not, if you are secluded for whatever reason, does that attitude of Thanksgiving, does that remembering what Christ did, is all of that valid? Is all of that a part of the whole? Does it matter to God? All of those questions that you can get caught in is not, none of that is the important bits of getting focused in on the individual component versus the sum total of the body. Because if you are stepping forward as a part of the body to say, as a body, you have given us this, that happens over here. Praise is this thing that you can use a talent, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be singing. It can just literally be speaking words out of your mouth. It can
Some
be
of us are
thoughts.
getting thanks that we are not seeing. So
Yes. It's not we in the West, we think about praise in the sense of this, whereas praise is this, um
and what you just talked about is the reason why we need both. Is because if when you are secluded and you're like, how am I supposed to give thanks when I'm by myself? The focus there is no longer on what you have, it's on what you don't have. So now the response should be praise.
yeah.
And when you do actually go into a atmosphere of praising God for who he is,
Yeah.
it reminds us of what he has done. And when we are reminded of what he has done, we remember
Right.
about the fact that we are not alone in this. The same spirit that is with me here in Ohio is with Joe in Pennsylvania. We are separated, but yet we are not. And so we are able to give thanks even though we look like we are separated out. And this is what Hebrews 11 and 12 is about.
Right.
The great cloud of witnesses in Hebrews 12 is the great long list of people that he just listed in Hebrews 11. Brandon and I just talked about this a few weeks ago in the episode on faith. We are a body even when we cannot see the other members of our body.
Right.
And that is something that we can be thankful for, even when it feels like we are alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's why we say what we say about, I'm not usually one to that's a fan of reclaim the day or anything else like that. But if there was a single holiday that even at its root value is most easily associated with the Christian faith, stories aside, fairy tale stories that we started the episode with aside, at its philosophical core, I mean, we're talking about concepts that, yeah, they get secularized, but this is foundational stuff. This is at the bedrock. And this isn't us sitting here pushing up our glasses and trying to tout how intellectually superior we are, because these are all things that anybody can learn. And these are things that are, if more Christians understood this, the richer their relationship with God would be.
Mm-hmm. And it would have to be. I mean, it would be a natural byproduct, because the concept of giving thanks to God as an act of worship is automatically going to draw you closer to what he has actually given you, what he has called you to. You know, that this is, I wouldn't necessarily say we need to reclaim the day. I would say what we need to be doing is we need to actually talk about and teach about what this day actually should represent for those of us that are a part of the body of believers.
Right.
You know, let the football games happen. Let the parades happen. Let the family stuff happen. But while your biological family stuff is going on, we also should remember the fact that this is an action that doesn't have to happen one day out of the year for our Christocentric, spirit-filled family to be able to celebrate this type of community and celebration year-round. Yeah. Because if we teach this well, we don't have to wait till November.
Right.
Because this is going to be a natural part of the worship service. That's what Paul was actually advocating for in 1 Timothy and in 1 Corinthians. Was that and in Philippians, if we actually were to go into our worship services with a heart that was giving thanks to God, then our praise would be that much sweeter.
Right.
And the rejuvenating effects of the body and the community and everything else that comes about from corporate worship would be much more effective and felt, because we would all be celebrating together. And we would be focused on the things that bind us together rather than the things that keep on separating us. So this is a shorter Misfits episode. It's actually a shorter Is It Pagan episode too, because normally by now we're just introducing the topic. But
yeah, that's true.
You know, this is one that we wanted to come in, do this for, well, one, for fun, but two, also because of the fact that it is an important concept that we don't talk about enough. So,
and I want to say, for as much as we have bagged on the Western Church, I do understand a couple of key things. One, a lot of churches do things like potlucks and stuff like that right now, and like community meals and all of that sort of stuff. Two, a lot of you guys are going to be doing family stuff and all of that. If you are doing family stuff, or if you are doing that shared meal experience and all of that sort of stuff, go in peace. We're not trying to give you a hard time about the fact that you guys get together as a family and watch football games and have a meal and all of that sort of stuff. What we're talking about is at that deeper layer, not how you choose to spend that individual day. If you can celebrate, exactly, if you can celebrate your family, if you can celebrate these aspects of what we're talking about, if this is present in that conversation, then fantastic. Then that's what we're talking about. So it's not a matter of do away with the day. It's a matter of, as you engage with this day, as a Christian, do an inventory of where you're at around this day. And if you are doing family stuff, is it just a giant stress? Is it more about a presentation than it is about the community aspect of it. All of those questions that, while awkward, while hard to address, they matter.
Mm-hmm. And that's we're not saying replace the day or reclaim the day or anything like that. We're saying that we need to, as a church, take the name with us and the attitude with us throughout the rest of the year, and not just on this one day where it happens to share the name on the calendar. That's what we're advocating for in this, is that this is an attitude that is sometimes completely unintentionally, but sometimes missed within our churches, especially the churches that get bigger. Some of the smaller churches do this really well.
Yeah.
They have praise reports. They have times of Thanksgiving built into their services.
Right.
It's harder to do that the bigger the church gets.
Yep.
But there's still room for this sort of an attitude to be a part of the worship service, especially when we actually understand what it actually is and what it looks like and why it matters.
Right. Exactly.
So, Joe, you finally finished the book of Matthew.
Yo.
So, Joe, everybody should know by now, he's got about 50,000 projects going on at once. Buddy Walk with Jesus, Kingdom on the Road on Fridays with me and Ant, Shell Shock TMT for all you shell heads. The Dynamic Duo is about to launch back up. The Whole Truth is about to launch back up. He's apparently talking about another project that he refuses to give me the name for yet. All these different things. If you are not a part of the Buddy Walk community, go join the Buddy Walk community over on Facebook. You want to check out the current series he's doing, which is For Such a Time as This, walking through the book of Esther. A little bit different than how you did it with Matthew.
Yeah. For those of you guys from this world, from the Misfit world, I think you guys in particular will enjoy For Such a Time as This. Mainly because this is me way closer to this world than where I tend to hang out and all of that. Mainly because a big inspiration for me addressing Esther is the way that it has been mishandled in the current political scene, in the current public discourse scene, all of those kinds of things. And so, yeah, the third episode is about to launch as of this recording, and the idea is every week will be a new chapter.
Yeah, so go check that out, buddywalkwithjesus.com or Buddy Walk with Jesus on any of the other channels, or you can go to Joe's profile on in the guest portal and you can find the links there. It's also going to be very good prep work. Actually, it's technically the sequel to what the next Bible study that we are going to be doing here in the near future. We're going to walk through the book of Daniel for the Patreon Bible study. So if you want to be a part of the Patreon Bible studies, we don't have a date yet, but the Galatians one is still up. So if you haven't checked that out, join Patreon, patreon.com/MrMisfits. Any of the levels get you access to the Bible studies, including the $3 level. So if you want to join in on any of the future Bible studies or check out the Galatians study that's currently up, you can do that at Patreon, patreon.com/MrMisfits. It is giving month still, so now is the time to join, because if you join Patreon in the month of November, your donation also is going to go to Tikva to help do the work that they are doing with the kids here in Canton. And it is about to be the season that started the whole Is It Pagan thing off to begin with, Joe.
Yep.
We are almost to Christmas. And that means it is time for the 12 Days of Misfits. It is almost here. So if you don't know what we're talking about, this is the other show that Misfits does, even though most of you think it's the same one. We are going to be testing Brandon's Christmas knowledge, his Bible knowledge, in ways that is really fun for me and gives him a headache. So this year, though, we're doing it a little bit different. Instead of him just having to figure out random passages and how they relate to Christmas, this year we're going to test his music knowledge as well, and he's going to have to be able to figure out what carol it is based off of what passage of scripture he just read. So that'll be going on December 13th through the 24th. 12 Days of Misfits. You don't want to miss that. You can subscribe to it through the regular channels you already subscribe to, or you can subscribe to it separately on YouTube through the YouTube podcast link, or you can go to the 12 Days of Misfits site on the Misfits site. So, Joe, thanks for doing this, for marching your way through your COVID there. Like you said, Joe, I'm sure will be back. It's not like we ever can get rid of him. Go check out Buddy Walk with Jesus. Go check out the Esther series. Go join the Buddy Walk community over on Facebook, where we it's a little bit more interactive than the Misfits community, just because for whatever reason you guys don't like to post on Facebook. But go check all that out. In the meantime, we will see you all next week.
The Ministry Misfits podcast is a production of Ministry Misfit Media in association with Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers, and Brandon Simmons is associate producer. The Ministry Misfits theme song is written and produced by J.D. Laird and Laird Creative Agency. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com or by following @ministrymisfit on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also visit our website at www.ministrymisfits.com or through bio.link/Ministry Misfits. If you would like to support Ministry Misfits, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/Ministry Misfits.